Hey guys, what's up? Today I'll be talking about one of the most insane, craziest, and gnarly albums to come out of 2020, and I already have a smile on my face just thinking about it. This is the new Cryptic Shift album released in May, I believe, called Visitations from Enceladus. And let me just say, this is, as of right now, definitely my album of the year, my number one album. And this is just a phenomenal and mind blowing release of progressive death thrash mix with avant garde elements and technical riffs. And this is just everything I love and would want in a death metal album, done absolutely perfectly. And I'm super excited to be able to talk about it today. This vinyl copy was put out through Blood Harvest, and they also did a really good job just with the aesthetics, which is something that definitely plays a big part in this album because it's a concept album, it's got a story, and Blood Harvest did a great job on the layout, the essential lyrics, and of course the mandatory crazy naming of all the chaos and the solos and all the different parts this band has in their song, because it starts off with a around 25-minute monstrosity called Moonbelt Immolator, and this song is just absolutely unbelievable. It reaches the near 25-minute mark and is such a powerful way to start off this album. And it's split off. It's a 25-minute single song, but it's split into sections. So there's 6 sections: Detached from this Universe, Skirmish Above HD 101 80H, Interstellar Lands, Black Ore, Lair of the Time Ghouls, and Prodigy Echoes. And right when this came out, I saw some promo pictures the band had. It's on the insert, and I saw Xander Bradley, the band leader and guitarist, was wearing a Time Ghoul shirt, and from that point on, I was sold. I love this band, and I could sit here all day and say it sounds like Time Ghoul, it sounds like Nocturnus, Vector, Gorguts, but really, Cryptic Shift is an entirely new entity. They have their own signature brand of sound that they really perfected on this album. There's definitely some big references to bands like Time Ghoul and Gorguts. They definitely have their influences, but this is something completely unseen before and just completely unoriginal to this band. Uh, the opening section of Moonbelt Immolator is Detached from the Xenoverse, and it starts off right away with this really mysterious riff, and you got the classic use of these progressive intervals, these big chords that they just sweep through really nicely. And then the first taste of the vocals is that Time Ghoul clean style of choir singing, and right away it reminded me of exactly how the song Rain Moon starts, right when those vocals kick in. And that was the moment I knew I was absolutely sold on this album. And that song is just a magnificent winding space odyssey. I mean, it tells the story of it's a concept album, and I'm still digging through the lyrics, trying to really unpack it all. But a man in a spacecraft, lost, flying through space, escaping from otherworldly aliens, and it is just one massive sci-fi epic. And that song just effortlessly weaves through these incredible sections. John Riley is playing the fretless bass, and once again, let me just preface this by saying if a death metal band has a fretless bass player, chances are I'm going to love it already. And the bass performance is bar to none. Just, I want to say it's the best bass performance I've ever heard on a death metal album. And I know this is a really new release, and that can be a crazy thing to say, but I think I could say with full confidence that, at least in my opinion and what I've seen, John Riley just really brings the fretless bass playing to a whole new level I've never heard before. And that's where I also have to give props to the production crew on this. I know it was mastered by Damian Herring and mixed, who mixed it? I have it right here. It was JRH Productions. amazing job because every single note that bass plays, it just cuts through absolutely perfectly. And this is one of the few albums where just the bass has so much room to expand. It's one of those things where it just cuts through so perfectly. Every instrument is awesomely balanced, and that's a really big part of I think what this band needs because they're going for such an ambitious and crazy sound, and the production really needs to let the music be up front and center. If something's muddy, if something's inaudible, that's really going to affect the listening experience to this album. And another thing is Ryan Shepperson on drums. The bass and drums just have this unbelievable chemistry throughout the entire duration of the record. They're locking in rhythms with each other while the guitars are doing something else, which is another thing I love about this album. This really showcases three-voice death metal. One guitar doing something, one guitar doing something else, and then bass and drums locked in. And I think it's not that often you have three separate parts coming in together to create music. It's usually one, maybe two if you got guitar one, guitar two, and bass is usually following one of the guitars, the rhythm part. But the bass is really branching out and just becoming its own entity along with the drums, which I think really highlights the brilliance of all these musicians in Cryptic Shift and what they can accomplish if they put in the hard work, because I can tell that these guys are really advanced musicians. It's something where when I listen to this album, sometimes I try to take it in all at once, and sometimes I spend the whole release just listening to what the bass and drums are doing, because the way they're interacting with each other, the way they're locking in some rhythms, the bass is weaving in and out of drum patterns, guitar patterns. Every bass drum played is locked in with the bass. It's purposeful. It's not just here's the drums playing a beat. It's here's the drums playing a beat and doing something specific with the bass, doing hits with the bass while the guitars are doing leads. I mean, it's just absolutely magnificent what John and Ryan are able to do with the chemistry that they lock in together on this album. And another thing is that there are bass solos every single song, which is absolutely awesome to hear. And I just can't say enough good things about John's performance on this record. The bass solos are, they're awesome. And I don't really have much. I could go on about the bass and drums and the rhythm section as a rhythm player all day long. But anyway, back to the actual song. After Moonbell Immolator, the second track on there is Petrified in the Hypogean Gal, which is definitely a different pace, which is cool because the band really loads a massive, just heavy song right off the bat on the listener. And this is a really epic song. There's a lot of melodic solos that it's kind of one of those things where their solos pack a lot of emotion. They have their fair share of crazy dive bombs and whammies going down the fretboard chromatically, but they also do have a very large amount of melodic solos, both like emotional melodic and atmospheric melodic. In Moonbell Immolator, there's a section titled Interstellar Lands, which has like 4 or 5 guitar solos that are absolutely beautiful, and it's really just so atmospheric. I mean, the song titles of the guitar solos match the vibe perfectly. Off the top of my head, Interstellar Lands, Rolling Hills of Nebula, that is the guitar solo. The name just pops a perfect image of what this album is going for in my head. And also on the second track, there's a little bit of some avant-garde, like Obscura era Gorgut style riffs, which I really enjoy. I really like the way they use that because it's not like when Gorguts plays that avant-garde style of death metal, it's every riff. And this band, they are able to incorporate some straightforward thrash riffs. The vast majority of this album is crazy technical, but then they can also get that really weird avant-garde riffs in there. The 2 parts that come to mind, there's one part in Petrified in the Hypogean Gal, and the bass, what the bass does to build up this riff is another thing I absolutely love and could talk about and go on and on for. But basically, it's coming out of a bass solo, and there's this big rising climax to this riff, and the drums are getting crazy. They play a blast beat, and the bass does this ascending like, what's the word I'm looking for? He does this ascending line up, and it just perfectly like hits the climax, silence, and then they come in with this absolutely crushing riff, which is unbelievable. And that is probably it's hard to choose a favorite track from this album, but that is definitely a standout one. The third is called The Arctic Chasm, which is just another absolutely pummeling track. The main riff in that song is super catchy, and that's another song that kind of toys with the avant-garde style. There's one riff in there that I'm pretty sure is a total reference to the riff in Obscura by Gorguts, the outro one, where they actually slap the guitar to switch the notes, which is really cool. And I love that technique. I love the sound, that technical style sound that brings up to the guitars, which is awesome. And then another thing I wanted to mention was, this kind of goes back to the whole Blood Harvest killing it with the aesthetics. This is, being that it's a concept album, they do some really cool theatrical stuff with the insert. In Moonbell Emulator, there's a couple times where there's some robot vocals, kind of like in Cynic's Focus. And this is something that definitely wouldn't be brought to light if it wasn't printed with lyrics. Like, it's really important, especially in this release, I think, to follow along, because when they do the robot vocals, it plays a part in the whole story this album tells. And it has it in quotations, and it's the header is cipher translator activated. So it's one of those things where it's supposed to be the spaceship's console reading back like the robot message, which I think little things like that is really cool, where if you're listening to the album without the insert, it's something that would just totally go over your head. But if you're really trying to get into the whole conceptual experience of which I think the band wants you to, that's something really cool. Little things like that just add to the dramatic and to the theatrical of this album. Another one is there's like some made up languages, and it has like the translation in parentheses. I just thought that was cool. It's one of those things that just a little cool thing for the listener to pick up on as they listen to this album again and again, because this is something else. That's something that's going to take multiple listens to be able to unpack thoroughly. And the fourth track on here is Planetary Hypnosis, which is a really good ender. This one brings a lot of the fast-paced thrash energy. It's probably the most straightforward track on here, but it definitely has its big moments and its big highlights. And it brings a close to the album that when this album ends, I just want to flip the record back over and listen to the whole thing again. It's that just unbelievable. Everybody's performance on here. I think the one person I haven't mentioned yet is I might have switched the names thinking back, but Xander Bradley is the lead guitarist, the guy with the Time Ghoul shirt. Joe Bradley is the other guitarist, who I believe is not in the band anymore, but they both killed the guitar work on this album. This is one of those bands where every person just has to be on their part. It's not something where one person, they can follow along, just because everybody has their own individual parts to nail. And you can tell they all put just tremendous amounts of work in this. Both the guitar players play leads, and it's cool to see. They each kind of got their own style, and overall, this band brings a bunch of different ideas together of both death metal and thrash metal, which is cool. Not really traditional thrash metal, but voivod, technical style of thrash metal. Vector is also another band that comes to mind, just to create one of the best releases, at least that I've heard in the 21st century. Right now, this is definitely looking like my album of the year. There is one album that it's going to be close, and I won't spoil it because I eventually, by the end of the year, I want to do a review on that album and do a list of maybe my top 10 or 15 albums of the year. But I'm going to give this release a 10 out of 10, which makes it the only album I've ever talked about on this channel to receive a 10 out of 10 score. And I can definitely stand by that. This is how I love my death metal, and when bands can do it right, when they can just put these giant amount of riffs in these songs, just these crazy over the top but in the best way, solos, imagery, that's what I really love about death metal. And I think Cryptic Shift, this band, is doing monumental things for the genre. I've said before that I think they have one of the most ambitious sounds. What they're going for is really crazy and really out there. And I have nothing but respect and absolute awe for every single person in that band and all the performances on this album. So I highly, highly recommend you check this out. If you like bands like Time Ghoul, Vector, Voivod, Nocturnus, that death thrash technical style, but this really goes beyond that. So just strap in for the listen, and this is an album you want to listen to all the way through, and I recommend you get a copy. Blood Harvest has some, and so does Nuclear War Now. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.